Hello, and welcome to another edition of Swerve With Me. This is a show where we have adult conversations for mature audiences only. I'm Miranda Innes, and it's always a pleasure to come to you each night and talk to amazing people about their life's journey, what it is that they've been through, what's happening. I'm going to give you a while to come in. I have a guest tonight that has another awesome testimony of overcoming and what she's been able to do as a result of the experience that she's had and how she's reaching others with her story day to day. So come on in, invite somebody, share the live stream because I have Keisha Been Released Wade. She'll tell you why Been Released has been added to her name tonight. So let somebody know that we're coming on and go ahead and share. There are times in our lives when we get into situations that are out of our control. And the things that are out of our control, we somehow have to learn how to manage and to know when to be still and when to move. And sometimes it's a challenge for many people to be able to pick the right moments to move and I think there was a song that says you have to know when to hold up and when to fold up. And so we're going to be talking about red flags in relationships because that's huge. A lot of times we miss opportunities and we ignore signals in relationships that we're in. So, come on, tell somebody else that we're on. I just want to say a little housekeeping business that this is going to be my last show for this month. I am going on a hiatus, but I'll be back in October with a brand new season. I'm talking about lots more amazing people sharing their stories of overcoming. So, this is a show where we have adult conversations and we talk about the things that sometimes, as the church, we don't get involved in. Sometimes we don't want to get down to the nitty gritty to talk about the why we do things and why we act the way we do and why we make the decisions that we have. And this show is going to be enlightening for a number of people for so many reasons. And so I want to introduce my guest tonight, Keisha Been Released Wade. She hails from the state of Virginia by way of North Carolina, but now she's living just outside the DC area. Keisha and I share a group in common, and a couple of weeks ago, I was in the group just kind of scrolling, and she posted something that said, in essence, about her believing in miracles or something to that sort. And it was at that time, at that moment of reading that particular post, that the Holy Spirit prompted me to reach out to her and to find out if she would be willing to come on the show and share her story. And those of you who know me know that's how I flow, that's how I operate. Sometimes Holy Spirit just arrests me and tells me to seek out particular people. So she's one of those persons we've never met in person, but I believe that you will be truly and tremendously blessed by your story. Good night, Addie Liz. Good night, Elder Inslee. Good night, Newton. Good night, Jova. Come on in and let somebody know that we're here tonight with Keisha Been Released Wade. So, good night, Keisha. It's good to have you here.
How are you? How are you? How's everybody doing? Good to be here. Thank you for having me. Such a
You
blessing.
are you are certainly welcome. We always start at the beginning of the story, so let's get some background. And you were a church girl, born and raised in the church, working as the church secretary. So tell us a little bit about your life and what was it like growing up ultimately in Virginia and North Carolina?
Well, of course, I am born in Virginia. So Boston, Virginia is where I was born. And so my mother, a few years after being born in Virginia, we moved probably when I was 11 years old to North Carolina because of my mother's job. So she got a better job. And so we just stayed in North Carolina. So that's where I'm from. I would just say I'm from Virginia and North Carolina, really. And so, but raised with my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, we're all a close knit family all together. We all do events together. So we were all raised all together. And so had a great childhood life. with my mom. My mom was a single parent. She was a single parent with three kids, and she did a great, amazing job with us. And so, along with my aunts and my uncles and cousins and things like that. So, it was a very great childhood life.
So I said born and raised in the church, so that means you were actively involved in the church. You probably went to church every day of the week and was in the choir and the youth group
Yes.
and all those things that come with the territory. So talk about your involvement in ministry at such an early age.
Yeah, so yeah, born and raised in the church, literally in the church. So yeah, grandma had me singing at 5. So I started singing. So I love to sing, singing at 5 years old. Just being, I was also a usher. So I was doing a whole lot of different things in the church growing up. And so eventually, when we moved into North Carolina, I became like a junior church secretary, and then soon became a secretary of the church, and also singing in the choir, putting events together. So I was very active in the church all my life. So I basically, ever since I've known like age 4 or 5, I've been always in the church, born and raised in the church. Mother was in the church. My mom was an evangelist. Just everything was like I said, born and raised in the church.
So at 19 years old, you met someone who pretty much changed the trajectory of your life forever. So let's talk about what happens at 19.
Yeah, so at the age of 19, I did meet a young guy that's my children's father. And so at the age of 19, started dating him. And I like to say I noticed some things which I may call red flags. And some of you all may know, if once you see those red flags means to stop. So that means that something is not going right, something is not right. But, I'm like, things will probably be okay. I seen at the very beginning where he may have had anger issues. And I was like, everybody has a bad day or something like that. I just chose to avoid it. I've seen where, at the age of 19, he's, saying, I'm sorry, apologizing. And I'm like, oh, okay, you'll be okay. But by the time I was started dating him at 19, and then by the time I was 22, I had our son, and I wasn't married to him. And so got pregnant at 21, had him by the time I was 22. And so before I even got married to him, like I said, I seen things, red flags. And because I was in the church, I felt as if I needed to get married to him. So now at this very moment, I encourage women, and I tell people or men, just because you have a baby by somebody does not mean that you need to marry them all the time. So there were things, and he was, I would say, started off to be verbally abusive. So there were things being cussed out and saying things to me that was, just not nice. It was very negative. One of the things that, of course, I was aware of is we were too unequally yoked. I'm in the church and he's not. So you can imagine how that kind of transpired, that we were not on the same one, we were not in one accord. But again, just because I said, well, I have a baby by him, I want to get married, because in the church, being raised in the church, okay, so what are you going to do? You can't shack up, you can't live like that. Either you're going to get married or you're going to, not live with them. But I felt that since we had a baby I had a baby by him, it was best to get married.
Did you feel the pressure from your family and the church to marry, or that just came from you? These were your thoughts about what should be done, or was somebody there making that recommendation that you should marry him because you have a baby?
No, that was me. My church family, and I know my mom, they seen the things. They would always, kind of like often tell me, "Are you sure?" Like I said from before, getting married to him, I just remembered my own pastor would not marry us. I remember him telling me
Wait,
before.
slow down, slow down.
Oh,
So you go to the pastor and
right,
you tell him you want to be married. Did the
right.
pastor know the person that you wanted to marry?
Yes, he did know. He knew of him. So, like I said, he didn't really go to church with me, but he did know of him. He knew that was my child's father. And I'm like, oh, I want to marry him. And he's like, he didn't think that that was a good idea. One of the
So
things,
did he give you reasons though why you shouldn't marry this guy?
yes, he did.
What were the reasons? What did he say?
One of the reasons was he wasn't going to marry me because he didn't want the blood on his hands. He didn't want to be responsible of marrying somebody when I know that he felt as if that he was not for me. He was saying, God saying it was not for me. In a way, I knew that he wasn't for me. But in my mind, I have a baby by him. So I felt like I needed to be in this relationship, have you have a house, you have a husband, have a wife, you have a child, you're all living together. But eventually, that's not always the case of it wasn't a healthy relationship. Like I said, my name won't Keisha to him at some of the times, and this was before we got married. I should have, of course, even in the midst of trying to get somebody to marry us, I remember getting another person. I'm like, okay, well, let me see if I can get somebody else. And when that person was like, well, wasn't your pastor marrying you? And I was like, well, trying to say, well, he doesn't really want to marry us. And he was like, no, I'm not doing it either. So at
Wow.
the
So wait a minute. So two people turned you down from
well,
being married, and you went on and saw the third person.
Well, I actually asked mom. I remember talking to my mom about it, and she kind of like saying, because she's an ordained minister, she was like, I'm not doing it. She did say that she didn't want to do it kind
So
of
that
either.
was number three.
Yeah,
That's
that was kind of like number three. And then I had a friend that was actually in the wedding that got a cousin of hers to like marry us. So
oh
that's how I got
wow.
married.
So you had red flags
Red
all
flag.
around you, and people saw,
They
like
saw.
from the very beginning, that
Hmm.
this was not a good idea. But
Right.
you wanted that family, the whole white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the husband. And we understand that so many people fall into that trap
Yes.
where it's the picture that's painted
Mhm.
before us, that it's the ideal life.
Right.
And so after being turned down three times,
Right. Yes.
you finally find somebody to marry you. And and you marry him. And what's the marriage like in the beginning? Like, you get
Well,
married.
I can just recall that we got married that Saturday. He got missing that Monday. So he did, and then he was drinking. So it was there were things before we got married of him drinking, him cussing. I've seen those type of things, but like I said, I'm like, well, I got a baby by him. But the minute that I said I do, it just got worse. It got worse. Like I said, we got married on that Saturday. That Monday, he didn't come home. Or he came home, but it was like in the middle of the night. I'm like, where are you? I don't have to answer to you. It was those type of things.
Hmm.
Um, and even though he was doing it from before we got married, I'm like, okay, well, technically we're not married. So, but then, he just like wanted to hang out with people that were single, like he was
Hmm.
still living the single life of that. So that's the reason why I said we were totally two different people, two unequally yoked people. I'm in church, he's not in church.
Hmm.
So it was almost as if you wouldn't even, some people may not even know that I was married because they didn't really see us together like that.
Right. So you get married Saturday, Monday he's missing, and you ask him about it, and he says, I don't have to answer to
Yeah.
nobody. I'm my own kind of man,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. At that moment, was that a repeated pattern
Yes.
in the relationship where
Yeah.
he would just go missing? And
Yeah, like, or he would come home, but it would be maybe like 1 or 2 o'clock. And I just remember feeling like, wow, already in the beginning, because, like when you get married, like, okay, you're going to go through some things. The marriage vows say for better or for worse. Like, okay, I'm like in the very beginning. I mean, I remember there were so many times that I would make sure at the particular time I had one child, my son was sleeping. I remember just crying sometimes, like
Mhm,
crying. Literally crying and then writing my prayers out in a notebook of like, God, help me get through this.
mhm,
I'm just got married and here I am going through the things. But when I think about it, when I was first married, I'm like, these are the things that I saw way before I got married. So it was almost like I'm trying to cope with it. I'm trying to deal with it. God, I'm praying to God, God, show me how to deal with this. But I'm like, in my mind, if I seen the signs and if I had people already telling me, giving me that wisdom, giving me that knowledge of saying, hey, I don't think this is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't really get married to him just because you have a child with him. And so that is my main kind of like focus of what I often tell people. Just because you have a child with them doesn't mean that you have to marry them, because it's not always the case,
Mm-hmm.
a good case for that. So.
At any point did you feel like you had to prove those people wrong? Like who said that you shouldn't marry him? Did that ever come into your mind?
No, it didn't come.
No.
No, I just pretty much just felt, okay, I got a child by him. And now that I'm married, I'm trying to make it work, but I'm pretty sure people, like I said, have heard how he was talking to me very
So he
rudely.
would talk to you like in public, like it didn't matter where you guys were. If he got upset, he would just
Yeah.
blurt out stuff.
Yeah, yell at me and different type of things in stores. I really didn't like going anywhere with him because he was rude, of saying things. So it was almost like if you all had that experience of like walking on eggshells of like, okay, what to say, what not to say, what not. I was trying to figure it out of what not to say and things like that, of trying not to make the situation how it is. Or, we're already in public. I'm like, okay, like, let me make sure I do this and go here or something like
Mhm.
that.
Did you know anything in particular? Did you learn anything that would trigger him? Did you know what his triggers were?
It was just some things he would just say, I don't want to be around you. And I'm like, why? What did I really do? He really wasn't the type of person to talk about it. So I think there probably was some family issues that he probably may not have talked about, that he really didn't verbalize it to me. So he wasn't a person to where talked about a lot of different things. So I never really knew like why are you talking to me like this? He just was get upset really quick. I'm like, he has some issues. And I'm like, maybe we need to go to counseling. No, didn't want to do any of that. So it was just almost as if he just wanted to get married and have a wife at home and a child at home. And then he does his own thing. That was basically.
Were you able to meet his family to get some insight into the type of people that they were?
I mean, I did meet his family, but I wasn't as close with them like that. So it was basically like, like if they had a cookout or something, I did go there, but I don't drink, I didn't smoke, and some of them did that. That's the reason why I said we were totally two different lifestyles of the family. I'm not saying all of his family was drinking or smoking or something, but majority of them were kind of like that, because he was like that. That's the reason why I said those were the red flags that I should have seen from day one. While being in a relationship, when you're not really a drinker, a smoker, and things like that. And so that's kind of like that.
So you met the family and they pretty much, and you had no idea about his background because you never talked about it. You
No,
never shared anything
no.
about his childhood or anything. So you stay in this marriage. Did you ever feel connected?
I probably felt connected like sporadically at different times. Like I said, I can't really remember most of. I mean, it was more bad times than good times. So it might have been connected probably when I was 19. I didn't have any kids at 19. When you first meet somebody, you think you're in love. That might have been. But then after that, of course, calling me names, saying things, just being disrespectful, cussing me out. I mean, that was building up the hurt and, the things inside of me. Like I said from before, some of my family didn't really know what was going on, because some people may be this way of holding things inside. What I did was, instead of verbalizing or even speaking up or saying what's actually going on, I hid it inside. So in my mind, I'm a strong-minded person. You wouldn't know what's going on with me because I hid it well.
So
Um,
at no point did you talk to your mother about it or a cousin or a best friend or anything about
I
what you
did.
were
I
experiencing?
Yeah, I did talk to some people. I had a best friend. I did talk to her about it, so she was aware of it. But we would just say, I'm praying. She's praying for me. We're praying through it, and my mom knew. I knew my mom knew some of the things. And like I said, my mom always said, Keisha, you can come home. Because at the age of 19, my mom didn't even tell me I had to move out. I wanted to do it because I wanted to. I wanted to move out and be on my own. So that wasn't, like when you get out, I graduated at 18. I'm like, oh, I'm going to move out. And I just told my mom one day, oh, I'm moving out. And when I moved out, I moved with him. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how that kind of took place. And so, but after our first child, I seen it. He was a great father to the son at the particular time. And like I said, there were times to where it was just red flags was there. There were moments where we probably did have some nice times, but it wasn't too often. It was not too often with that.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Keisha Been Released Wade, and we're talking about the domestic violence that she experienced in her marriage. But the story gets better. Good night to all of you. Let me just read some of the comments. Peter May Fowler says, I will always say what you marry is what you will live with.
Mm-hmm.
Joba said, wow, I'm happy your eyes are open.
Yes.
Naoka says, oh. Joba says he is a misogynist and a narcissist. You're better off without him. God bless you.
Thank you.
Dorothy says, so sad you had to go through that at a young age.
Yes.
So you're constantly being verbally abused
Yeah.
for a number of years, and you're pretty much holding it in. But you're a school teacher, by the way, and you work with
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
And so one day at school, something happened. Let's talk about that. And how long had you been married at this point?
Well, by that time, I've already had two kids. So I have total two kids in all. So I had my daughter in 2004. So I would say by that time, it was not only just verbal, it was starting to be with the verbal threats of saying, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to do things, or he would throw things type of thing. So we probably had been married around about like,
What would make him throw something at you? Like he started throwing things.
I think he was dealing with his own issues. I really do think of them drinking, probably smoking, maybe some drugs was involved or something like that. I think all of that pretty much played a part with all of that. Majority of the time, like I said, he would come home and he would be drinking a lot. So, and I don't know if he was probably drinking to suppress some things that he might have been going through. Like I said, he never really discussed with me, or even if I probably tried to ask, he would probably say, get out of my face, So, and I just didn't want to see the kids going through that. And some of the things he would just say things that was rude. But by that time, like I said, we've probably been married like 5 or 6 years. My daughter is here, so we have two kids. And I just remember it was sometimes we're married and, I may have had to need money for something. He would say, oh, you have to pay that back. And I'm like, okay. So, there's a couple of times my car broke. I never will forget it. Had a flat tire, because this is when that situation that you're talking about, had a flat tire, and I'm 30 minutes from where we lived, and I'm probably about 10 or 15 minutes from work, and had a flat tire. And I'm like, I called him, because you would think that somebody that you're married to, hey, they'll come and get you. You got a flat tire. And he was like, you deal with it. So at that particular time, I'm like, I'm dealing with it. I mean, I'm on my way to work. And so it just so happens a police officer comes by and he sees that that I have a flat tire, and he changes it. So at this particular time, I guess, all kinds of thoughts is going through my mind, because I'm at this particular time that we've been married, like I said, about 5 or 6 years, and I've had a lot built up. So instead of me actually talking to my mom, hey, mom, this is what's going on. I need to get out of this situation. I just held it in because I'm like, okay, I still want to be married because we have 2 kids together. In my mind, I'm going to stay with him till I'm 18. So that's what
So
I'm
the
doing.
kids are 18.
I
So
mean,
the
till the
kids
kids are 18, yeah.
are,
Till the children are 18. So that's in my mind. But what ended up happening, the police officer changes the tire. I go to work. I work with was working with the children. I'm sitting on the floor with first graders, and I'm just talking to them. And the next thing I know, just I didn't even feel it coming. Tears just begin to roll down my face. And immediately I had to get up and just excuse myself. The assistant that was in the room, she was like, go ahead onto the bathroom. I got the class. So at that particular time, I knew, like, because at that particular time, I'm holding things in. I'm not telling really. You know how you tell somebody stuff, but you don't tell all of it. You're telling portions of it. Like I would tell my mom, like, yeah, he's doing a couple of things. My sister would notice things. And at that particular time, my sister was in college. She was my sister when I first met him was like 15. So, I really couldn't talk with her about it, So I'm the oldest of my mother's children. So it was not really that I could really talk to anybody or that I really wanted, because I'm strong minded. In my mind, I'm strong minded. I don't want nobody really to know that I'm going through anything, because I can handle it. That's what it was in my mind. But I had to allow God to just come in and break me kind of like from that. It's okay to talk to people. It's okay to be going through. It's okay to say that you need help. It's okay to do all of those things. So at that
so you had this breakdown in school where you just started sobbing uncontrollably.
Yeah, yeah. I finally, and matter of fact, I went. There was a counselor. It was a lady, a counselor at the school, and she said she saw me crying. She said, "Come to my office." So I came to the office and I kind of talked with her. And, she was like, like what's going on? What's wrong? She didn't know what was happening. I was just saying, there were some issues that was going on in my marriage, and so she just said that we're at school, and she just mentioned that, she would just keep me uplifted in prayer, and that if I wanted to actually talk to her and that of what was actually going on, that it was a safe place with her, So
Did you take her up on it and go back and talk with her?
I didn't really take up on it at that particular time, because I just kind of talked with her about a couple of things, but then I kind of like still like held it in, because I didn't want nobody to know really like what was going on. Like I said, I would be, this is how I would hide it. I would be crying. He would probably say something to me. He had probably done something to me. And the minute that I get to work, or the minute that I get to church, before I even, probably about 5 or 10 minutes before I get there, I would wipe those tears, and I would have, just wipe them away, and then just try to suck it up and like, okay, let me go like nothing is happening. That's how I would do it. And I did that for many years, not really talking about it. And so finally, and then, kind of like the other thing, my sister would come to me because I wore dark colors. I wore dark colors. And I remember her coming to me, why you keep wearing these black, I wore black all the time, or dark blue and things like that. Because, majority of the time, look at somebody, when somebody's going through, look at what they're wearing, look how their weight is. Because I did eventually lost weight. What ended up happening, people saw me, I'm like, oh no, I'm on a diet. I was really stressed. I was really stressed of what was going on. One thing, you telling me I'm paying bills or something, or I'm asking you for something, he's saying, oh, you need to pay me that back. So here I am, have 2 kids, and you're telling me I got to pay this back. So it was kind of stressful. I had to get another job to try to make ends meet. The other thing of it is, I really don't think that he wanted me to be successful. I had an associate's degree, trying to get an associate's degree. And that was one of the victories that came out of when I actually left him. I started out with an associate's degree. I mean, normally an associate's degree takes like 2 years. It took me like 6 or 7 years to get that associate's degree, because he didn't want me to succeed. One of the things was I needed him to watch the kids while I go to school. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do that. I had to ask my mom. I had to ask my brother to watch him or something like that while I took class. And so then there were times where I had to stop. I'm like, okay, I can't finish with their associate's degree because I don't have anybody to watch them or something like that. Or I have my part-time job that I had to do. I couldn't finish. So that was kind of like basically basically it.
Did you ever leave? Like, how many times did you leave before you
Yes.
left finally?
3 times. I left 3 times. You know that saying, three strikes and you out?
Mhm.
Believe that. It is three strikes you out. That first time that I left, I took and left, and I actually went to my mom's house because he was threatening. He was, saying all kinds of stuff. And I was like, it was just unhealthy for me, unhealthy for the children to be seeing. But then he says, oh, I'm not going to do it again. We kind of like got back. I'm like, okay, marriages go through things. He's like, oh, I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better. But I'm going to tell you just like this, each time that I went back, it got worse. It tremendously got worse every time. It was like 10 times worse. So I left the first time. Okay. Then the second time that I left, there was a trailer that was by my mom's house, and I stayed in that trailer, and I didn't stay in there long because he said, he'll get better. He'll get better. So lived there in an apartment and things like that. So finally,
But
back.
before you go to the final time, when you left the first 2 times, how long did you stay away from him? Was it just a couple of days, or how long did you stay on your
Well,
own?
I kind of lived with my mom, and it probably may have been, I still communicated, or I still may have stayed with my mom and then maybe spent the night down there at his house or something like that. So it was I probably stayed with my mom like a month, and then I would say, okay, I'm gonna go back.
Okay.
Like,
Okay. So what was the final straw that made you say, "Okay, that's it. I'm not going back."
well, it got really worse of where there were threats made to me. He would put his hands up to my face saying that I'd hit you, things like that. It was just also accusing me of different things, of maybe, hey, you're talking to this person, or, just accusing. I'm like, it must be you that's doing it. People that's accusing you, they're probably doing it themselves. So what ended up happening, and then there were the threats. And it was May of 2011 where I'm coming around to it. He would do threats saying, if the police is ever called, it's because you're dead. So I'm like, I got to get out of this situation. There were forks being thrown at me. I'm walking across the floor in the kitchen. He would just throw it, and I'm looking there. Soda bottles thrown, and I'm like, and he would just saying, get out of my house, get out of my house. He would just say those type of things. And in the meantime, of May of 2011, I never will forget it. I'm crying all this time, sporadically crying in the middle of the night and things like that. I would call and say, hey, I thought you was going to make this work, and all of this whole type of stuff. But in the meantime, God was speaking to me, and he was already telling me it's time to go.
Mhm.
It's time to go. And so May of 2011, God had me to get just a regular composition notebook. And he had me to write that in a journal, just start journaling. So in May of 2011, he had me titled, Get Ready for Your Transition Move. So in the midst of me writing in that book, and he told me to write the beginning of October of 2011, get ready for the transition move. So what I would write in that book, I would write prayers like in advance. God, heal me. Let my children not be depressed. Let me not be depressed. I would just be writing prayers in there. And then God, I was just writing like, God, this is what I want to have, a house for my children. I want safety for my children. I just began to write that. So that started in May of 2011. And then in June, all of a sudden he got better. So I was like, well, God, maybe, I'm writing in this book that, okay, he's getting better.
Answering my prayers.
Right. But no, that is not the case. That was
Mhm.
not the case. He got a little bit better. And then I would say maybe within a week or so, a couple of weeks, all of a sudden he got worse. It was, my name was not Keisha. Just say, my name was not Keisha. And then he would get upset. He would be nice, and then he would get upset, and all different types of things. And so at the meantime, this time I started to tell my mom what was going on. And she said, Keisha, come home. You can always come home. But in my mind, I'm like, hey, I have 2 kids. No, I'm going to try to find an apartment on my own and really just live on my own. But my mom says, put that pride down and just come onto the house. It's okay. It's okay to just come home. It's
Mhm.
okay until you get back on your feet. And I was like, no, I'm going to just wait. I'm going to find me an apartment. I'm going to, kind of like wait it out. That was in June. That was in July. In August, I felt that Holy Spirit kept on saying, move back with your mom. My mom said, Keisha, you need to move back with me. Come on home. Just come on. Because at the middle of the time, I'm crying, I'm upset, I'm having headaches, I'm frustrated, I'm losing weight. I am
Mhm.
really losing weight. And it wasn't because that I was actually dieting. I was stressed out type of stuff. I was being threatened, just looking around like to make sure I'm trying to do things right. He's saying, get out of my house, and, all of that whole type of stuff. So in September, the end of September is when it finally hit the ceiling fan. It was the end of September, and it was like 1:30 in the morning. At that particular time, I had both of our children in bed with me, and we were asleep. And he comes home, and when he came home, he actually came to the room and he woke me up and he smacked me across the bed. So I jumped up like, what's going on? And in the meantime, I already knew there was a gun in the closet because he kept I think it was like a shotgun in the closet. So
Mhm.
I was like, okay, this is really about to get real. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm probably about to die, tonight. That's what took place. But I began to kind of fight back, kind of fight back with scuffling. And in the midst of it, our daughter was still asleep. At the time, she was like 4 or 5 years old. She never woke up for it. I yelled for my son, grabbed the phone. And at that particular time, we had a house phone and I had a cell
Mhm.
phone. I yelled for my son, get the phone to dial 911. Because we were scuffling. He's fighting me and he's trying to pin me down. I don't even know what's going on because at that particular time, I think he had been drinking. So he's coming home drunk and I don't know what else he had been involved in. So we're scuffling and my son ended up giving me the phone. And he, at the particular time, my husband at the particular time takes the phone out of my hand. It's the cell phone and he throws it against the wall. So the only thing that I knew I had was the house phone. So my son went to get the house phone, and what he did was he held the house phone. And I just said, okay, I surrender. I'm like, I'll stop. I tried to okay, let me stop. And my son was there. And I was like, hey, our son is watching. So I still, at this particular time, can't grasp what's going on. Like, why are you attacking me? Why are you attacking me? So at that particular time, I'm like, okay, I'll stop. I don't know what's going on, but the kids, I didn't want my daughter to wake up. My son was already seeing it because my son was trying to get him up off of me at that particular
Mhm.
time. So then I'm like, it's okay. I'm telling my son, it's okay. Trying to brace my son of what's actually going on. So then at that particular time, my husband at that time, I tell my son, okay, go on back to sleep. It's okay. It's okay. Mommy's okay. He goes back into the living room. And so at that particular time, I'm just laying down in the bed with the kids. I'm crying. I'm crying because I already know, God, is this my last day of living? You know what I mean? Is
So
this
your husband just stopped attacking you.
Yeah,
Just
because I'm like, our son is looking. And at that particular time, our son was trying to push him up off me, stop hitting, stop, doing whatever he's doing to me. And so he just stopped. So, and then what ended up happening, he goes into the living room. And at that particular time, he takes the house phone with him. And I can see from the bedroom to the living room, I can see where he's at and things like that. So I'm trying to calm the situation down and I'm letting my son know, okay, it's okay. Just go ahead on back to sleep. Around that time, it's probably around about a little bit after 2 a.m. So I see he sits the house phone down on the counter in the living room where our table was. And he goes into the back room. And I heard God said, get the
Mm.
phone and run outside. At that particular time, I wanted to take the kids with me, but I'm like, I know he's not going to harm the kids. I got up, I ran and I grabbed that phone and I ran outside and I dialed 911. Because mind you, let me just remind you, he told me from before, the reason why the police is here is because I was dead. And I was like, I am not going to die. I am going to live. I am going to raise my kids. My kids will see me. They will not have a mother that's dead. At that particular time, like I said, my daughter was like 4 or 5. My son was like 7. So at that particular time, I called the police. When the police got there, they just said that he had to leave. I didn't even press charges. Matter of fact, he was trying to say that I hit him. So the police kind of like, I think I had like a bruise on my arm or something like that. And I didn't want to press the charges. And I just said, the police officer told him that he had to leave. And I just told the officer came to me and he said, ma'am, are you okay? Are you going to leave or something like that? Mm-hmm. And I called my mom, told her what was going on. And I told them that I was going to leave that weekend, not thinking what God had told me back in May of 2000, and May that following year. And sure enough, I moved out. And the first weekend of October is when I moved everything out, is what God had told me back in May of 2011.
To get ready for a transition.
The first weekend in October. And that's exactly when I moved out. And guess what I did? I moved right back with my mom. Right back with my mom. She accepted me. And everything, and was just there. I had that support system, and that was guiding me through, helping me through, praying with me, and things like that.
So as you moved back with her at that period, was there any point that you still tried to reconcile with him, or he tried to reconcile?
Well, at one particular time, I was wondering if it was going to be, because like before, I went back, I left, I went back, I came back. I thought it was going to be one of those, because even while I was staying with my mom. So in the month of October, I knew it was going to be different, because it was like a couple of weeks being in at my mom's house, and he, we probably had called each other, and he was, checking on the kids or something like that. And he would say, you can come on home. It's going to get better. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. But the Holy Spirit was like, do not go back. Do not go back. But the thing that God was telling me, what I needed to do was ask for forgiveness to him, ask him to forgive me of things that I did. And I was like, why, talking to God, why should I ask for forgiveness? And this man has put me through so much things. So at that particular time, I was wrestling with God. No, I'm not doing that, because at that particular time, I'm upset. I'm bitter. I'm like hating him, I had so much emotions that was built up, and God says, go and apologize to him. Ask him to forgive you. And in my mind, I'm like, what if he don't forgive me? God says, go ahead and do it. So here it is in the month of October. It's towards the end of October. God was just, how God is just pushing you to do it. So eventually I went on and done it. And I just tell you just like this.
How did that conversation go? Did you just call him up? Did you meet him? Like, what happened?
Yeah, at that particular time, our son was into sports, into bowling, and so we was kind of talking, and I was like, asking him to forgive me, and he kind of like, "What you telling me for?" He's still trying to get smart with me, type of things, because I wasn't coming home. So it was like he didn't have that control over me, and I'm like, no, I'm not coming home. I want to, God is just telling me to ask you to forgive you or to forgive me anything that I've said, anything that I've done. And he was like, maybe said a couple of cuss words at that particular time. But this is where that, the other part where my testimony comes in, because the minute that I asked him to forgive me, it was like God's hands were like on one shoulder here and one shoulder here. And I just felt everything release up off of me. So whatever I was feeling about him, it was just like all the feelings, all the emotions, the sadness. I probably was going through depression and maybe even suicidal thoughts that I was feeling before in that marriage, of, just different type of things in your mind, or whatever the enemy had me bound in that relationship. I just felt God releasing it up off of me. And that particular moment, God says, now you are Keisha Been Released. You have been released out of this marriage. I'm releasing you off of this. And that's how this ministry was birthed. The ministry was birthed as that. So I just say, what the enemy meant for bad, God just turned it around for my good. Even though I went through those situations in that marriage, God just turned it around into the ministry, which is the ministry is now, and it's called Release. Because, no matter what you're going through, whether it's domestic violence or whatever it is, sickness, diseases, jobs, God can release you up out of it if you allow him to. And the thing about it is, I allow God, because sometimes I talk to people, and when I talk to them, they're still there. They haven't released it. They're still there in that situation, and they haven't fully released of what's actually going on with them. And so I didn't want to continue to keep going on in that relationship. So I just stayed there. So Miss Miranda, you still there? I'm not sure if she's still there, but I just want to say, well, she's probably coming on back, but I didn't want to stay in that relationship, couldn't stay in it. And so I allowed God to release me up out of that and say, I'm not going back. That means that I had a renewing of the mind of what was going on, of saying, God, renew my mind. Romans 12:2 talks about the renewing of the mind. So God just renewed my mind. And I said, I'm not going to continue to go on living like this. I'm not going to continue to go back and get tortured even more, or going through unhealthiness. I call it, it's just unhealthy. Those red flags are there for a reason. And so this ministry of release was birthed through that. Through that. So it says on my shirt, you can see it, I will overcome, be strong, and keep on keeping on. Even in the midst of just going through that, the ministry was that, like I said, God just put his hands on my shoulder and uprooted whatever I was feeling up off of me. And so I allowed God to heal me, allowing God to revive me, restore me, refresh me, deliver me from all the things, the shackles, the chains, the generational curse, all of those things. I allow God to release it. It was no longer me holding on. Well, because in my mind, what was it holding on to? What was it doing for me? It wasn't doing anything. It was just causing me pain. It was causing me issues. It was causing me trials. It was causing me situations to keep going through, and then allowing my kids to see me go through that. I didn't want my daughter to say, oh, mama went through that, so it's okay. I didn't want my son to say, hey, she's going through that, so it's okay. So that's basically what I did, was just continue to keep going on. And this ministry of release was birthed through that. And so that's what I encourage people now about the ministry of release. I will overcome, be strong, and keep on keeping on. No matter if I have to go on this road myself, by myself, I'm going to keep on keeping on. I'm not going to let nothing stop me. Not going to continue to let anything hinder me from having the purpose of what God has purposed in my life to do. I'm going to continue to keep pressing on.
How how long was it before you actually divorced after having that experience?
So the separation took in October 2011, and the divorce was final 2013 in June. In June.
When you got divorced, did you experience like grief or sense of loss, or was it just a sense of relief?
No, it was a sense of release. I was so relief and release. I was excited. I was excited. I was happy at that particular time. He didn't even come to the divorce. You know, he was not even there. The judge says that my lawyer said, "Is he here?" I said, "No," and the judge says, "Up, you're divorced." So that
Oh,
was June of 2013, and hadn't looked back since. So, but even in the midst of that, I just want to share with the people that I allow God to heal me. Sometimes we can be still stuck back in the past, stuck in that situation. But one of the things I just want to encourage you, I didn't allow him to have control over me. Anytime, the thing about it is people say, no, nobody has control over me. I said, yes, they do. Anytime that you can be happy and that person comes into the room and they change your whole mood, they change your whole atmosphere, they have control over you. Now, if I probably was to see him today, I can still be smiling. I can still do what I want to do. I can still do the purpose that God has for me. I can still say, hey, how you doing? And keep it moving. That no longer hinders me. I no longer allow that to hinder me because I allow God to heal me. I said, God says, ask for forgiveness. Because you know, the thing about it is God says, forgive him. Ask him to forgive you. Forgive him. So I just did that. And so at that particular time, I allowed God to work in me. So I was not interested in dating anybody. No, not interested. I was allowing, because one of the things was I had 2 kids. I didn't want to say, because sometimes when I talk to people, they say, oh, I got to have somebody. You got to be healed within yourself. And I allow God to truly heal me within, heal my mind, heal my spirit, heal my soul, heal my heart. So I allow God to truly heal me in time. And then what I did was I just got more in my word, deeper down into it, with this ministry that God has birthed me with release of just really getting deep rooted down more into God and singing and just enjoying life more, instead of being like walking on eggshells. It's nothing like being free, just freedom.
Mhm.
You don't have to no longer be bound. I don't know if anybody's been bound before, but it doesn't feel good to be bound and to be chained up, like you can't go anywhere, you can't move. And I was not going to allow my past to stop me, to bound me. I wasn't going to allow that relationship to just keep me bound up and chained, of being stuck there, of not moving forward, of what God has for me.
Mhm. Okay. Let me just try to read some comments. Okay, let's see. All right. So Brandy Cooper says, "Thank you for sharing your story." Beulah May Fowler says, "I celebrate your deliverance and freedom." Elder Inslee says, "Forgiveness brings healing, so it's good to forgive, and that's what you did." Nayoka says, "Healing must come from within." Myrna says, "Yes, you have to let it go and let God. It is not easy when
Mhm.
you're in it, but a sense of release comes once you surrender all to God. And you can now talk about the situation with others after the healing process. To God be the glory."
Amen.
What's your relationship like with him today, and what's his relationship like with the kids?
There is none. We haven't seen him in probably 10 or 11 years. One of the things was when we last seen him, he basically took it out on me for the kids. He just basically, because so the situation was, I was doing it, was trying to co-parent at that particular time. And I was like, okay, well, maybe you get the kids every other weekend, they stay with you and then they come back with me, that whole type of thing. But he was still trying to do a control. And in the control, he was like, well, in order for me to see the kids, you have to stay here. I shouldn't have to stay there. I don't have to stay there with you to spend time with your kids.
Right.
And so when I said, no, I'm not staying there, he said, okay, well, I guess I'll see the kids when they turn 18.
Mhm.
And my son at this particular time is 20 and my daughter's 17, and we have not seen them in years. So he has no relationship with them at all. None.
Wow. Okay. So your divorce, how's that impacted the kids? Have they verbalized how they feel about that?
I think it probably had some effect because, like I said, even while I was with them, he was a great father to them. He was a great father, and even I just encourage other people too. I never talked bad about him. I always told my kids, "Let's pray for him." I never downed him. I never talked bad about him or called him names or said, that. I just said, "Hey, let's pray for him." So because he was a great father, but in the end, because I'm not with them, he chose not to be with the kids, and just kind of like took it out on me, on for them. But I mean, just talking with the kids, I think they probably had their moments. My daughter was a daddy's girl, and she was growing up, although she was younger, 5, but she was like a daddy's girl. So she talked about him, but I kind of like was praying and to God, and then just having my pastor at the time and first lady at the time. I had a great support system of talking and then just letting them know, hey, dad is going through some things right now. Let's just keep him uplifted in prayer. So that's kind of like how I kind of addressed it with them.
So 2013, your divorce is final, and at this point, you're thinking, "I'm done with marriage. I'm never going to get married again. I'm just going to focus on raising my kids and trying to create the best life possible." And so you just go on doing exactly that, staying involved with ministry and all the
Yeah.
things that you were doing. And then you have an experience one day at work. Was it like how long after the
Yes.
divorce did you have this
Well,
experience?
it was before the divorce. So I left him in 2011. And so at this particular time, I'm letting God heal me because in my mind frame that I was thinking, oh, I'm never getting married. I've had I've been with this man since I was 19. I'm never getting married again. I'm just going to raise my kids and be by myself. So in July of 2012, I was at work, and at that particular time, I heard God speak to me and say, "You're getting married again." And I'm looking at like, no, I'm not. Like I'm having that comment. No, I'm not getting married. But at that particular time, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the comedian named Kevin Hart. He had a show out, I guess, laughing at my pain or something. And the women at work was talking about his comedy. And so at that particular time, I'm talking with the women and things like that. And God began to show me and speak to me right then and there of July 2012, saying, you're going to get married again. He's a comedian and he's left-handed. And I'm like, what? I'm not getting married again. I'm not meeting no comedian. I'm just thinking, because I'm like, I don't want to deal with that situation. I went through something, and God just began to say to me in July 2012, you're getting married again. He's a comedian. He's funny, and he's left-handed. So at that particular moment, I'm not really thinking about anything, thinking about nobody of dating or anything. I'm just trying to raise my kids. Mm-hmm. And so a few months later, like in November, at the church that I was attending, I was like an event planner. So I planned some of the events. And so I was trying to have on a gospel explosion there at the church. And I said, I want to do something a little bit differently. So I said, I was on Facebook. And I was looking at different things, and I hadn't been too much on Facebook. Facebook was kind of new. And so I seen where it had two comedians that was on there. And I was like, oh, that's a Christian comedian. I said, that's kind of different, because in my mind, I only heard of secular comedians. I've never heard of a Christian comedian or anything like that. And so I'm looking like, oh, okay, that would probably be different to have at a gospel explosion, because I was going to have somebody singing, a choir singing, someone dancing, and, a comedian. So I am at this particular moment on Facebook, and I friend request two comedians, because I was looking, like, I may get one of them to be for the event that I was doing. So that was November of 2012. And so at that particular time, I had looked at both of them, and I hadn't reached out to them. So I was looking at how their lifestyle was and things like that to see how they were. And in January of 2013, it's kind of like when I reached out, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm gonna go ahead and put this event together and reach out to one of the comedians. So I reached out to one. And when I reached out to him, I just went to his website, said, hey, I'm interested in an event. And it was towards like the end of January. And so he responded back, and I was like, oh my goodness, he responded back. So he's like, hey, you want to book me? Here's my number to call me. It was probably like in February, 2 weeks later. And then he kind of like hit me up again, sent an email. Hello, are you still serious about, the inquiry about him? And I was like, okay. So on February 19, 2013 is at around about 3:45 p.m. I recall it. I had just got off work, and I gave him a call, and I was talking to him, the comedian, about booking him for the event. And so we talked from 3:45 all the way to 8 p.m. So
the first
conference, yeah.
What are you talking about for hours?
Right. So like the first part of the first like 20 or 30 minutes was about booking. And then the next part, he was asking me about computers. So I also so let me just take it back to this thing. So even when I was married the first time, and I had mentioned that I had an associate's degree, it took me like 6 or 7 years to get that associate's degree. But one of the praise reports that I have to say is the minute that I left that marriage, I ended up having my master's degree, my bachelor's and my master's degree within 4 years of after leaving that. So I also have a degree in technology. So he asked me about his laptop. So I was like, how does he know that I know about his laptop? And he said, oh, the Holy Spirit showed me. And I was like, okay. But at that particular time, I was like, you're doing a little bit of flirting, what I'm saying? So I was like, okay, so we're talking. And then he began to share with me his testimony. So I was like, okay, he probably, shares his testimony along with other people that he probably booked or that wants to book him or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, but then, he would sound like if also that he was like interested in me, like dating or something, because he was like, oh, you're dating somebody? And I'm like, no, I'm not dating anybody. And then I would try to reflect it back to the event that I'm booking it for.
Right.
So I would tell him, I said, so I'm going to call you. I'm going to get back with my pastor and I'm going to let you know what he says, the prices and things like that. And then on that Friday, because that was on a Wednesday, on that Friday, he calls me up and I'm like, I kind of mentioned that I'm going to talk to my pastor on that Sunday and then, let you know. And he said, oh, I just wanted to call you and see how you were doing. So I was like, okay, yeah. So I was like, okay, so I'm doing fine. And so we just began to talk. We were just talking. We talked for that whole weekend. And then out of the blue, he was like saying like, he was kind of interested in me and things like that. And at that particular time, my divorce wasn't final, even though I wasn't seeing their dad at anything. I was like, I still was like, hell, I had my guard up because I was like, I'm not going to, not doing any of that type of stuff. And the thing about it is, I lived in North Carolina. He lived in Washington, D.C. So long distance relationship. And I was like, okay. So we just kind of like remained friends. So we were just talking, like he would just check on me and all of this whole type of stuff. And so we just kind of talking. Then after divorce was final is when he was like, you know what, God showed me that you're my wife, that I'm going to be your wife. I mean, that, that you're my wife. And I'm
wow.
really?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought back to what God told me in July of 2012, when he says, you're going to marry a comedian and he's left-handed. So I was like, okay. So at that particular time, like I said, it's 2013 and we're just talking on the phone as friends. And I'm like, okay. So I never did actually get to meet him in person. So, we're just talking. And plus I didn't want to bring another man into my life and I have children. So I kind of like stayed on the phone talking to him until 2014 is when we kind of like said, okay, well, we'll make it official. He came down and it was kind of like we had a long distance relationship. And that first time when he told me that he was left-handed in 2013, I didn't bring it back up of what God told me. So immediately when I first met him, he got a room at a hotel and I was looking at what hand he was writing with because I never did bring the situation back up of what God showed me. And he wrote with his left hand. So here he is, a comedian, and he's left-handed, and we got married. So we eventually went on and got married in 2016. So, but yeah, so
that's just an incredible story.
Yeah, it is.
Did had God ever spoken to you so directly before when you heard that? And precisely in terms of telling you something specifically and it happened just like that.
I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure there are times that God has spoken to me and it has happened.
You were aware of.
Yeah, there were things that I can kind of think back to that God has said, and I think at that particular time also I was kind of getting out of a relationship, didn't want to be involved, and you know how I was allowing God to heal me, so He was showing me a lot of things. I was writing down a lot of things, and as I'm thinking back, I'm like, a lot of these things have come to pass. Like one of the things when I was in the first marriage, and he said, "Oh, you would never go back to school. You would never be nothing or anything like that." Mm-hmm. And like I said from before, I left out of that marriage barely with that associate's degree. But the minute that I left him, within 3 years, I had my bachelor's and my master's degree in that to better my life. So, at that particular time, I think their dad wanted me to pretty much kind of depend on him, like depend on him. Oh, you need me for this, you need me for that. And that was the other, I think that was the other thing, even before I got out the marriage and I stayed with my mom, was how am I going to make it? How am I going to make it? But it's just like, I kind of like go back to it. The minute that I did left him, I left him alone. I didn't even take the children's bed. I didn't even take the material things because God was showing me those things can be replaced. It can be replaced. So, and it definitely was. God definitely made a way, had people giving me things and I didn't even have to worry about anything. So God definitely is a provider. I just, and there were just things in my journal that I was writing. I still have that journal to this day to where I just look back and reflect on. And like I said before, I was writing down in 2011, the prayers of the future. of what I
Mhm.
wanted to happen. And I can see some of those things are already taking place. The author, being a self-published author, a lot of different things of getting my degree, a bachelor's, getting my master's degree. I can see it already coming to pass, and what God was actually saying to me actually coming to pass. So
So you marry your left-handed comedian,
yes.
and so how was the experience from the first marriage? How did it change you and prepare you for your second marriage?
Well, the thing about it is, when I met my husband now, he is someone that was lifting my spirits. He brought it to my attention also. Why do you keep wearing black? You're beautiful. You know, if you've never heard those words, if you've never had a man to tell you that you're beautiful, or I'm so used to hearing negative type things. And so he was uplifting my spirit. Matter of fact, before we even got married, he was like, "Oh, these earrings would look nice on you. These shoes would look nice on you. Oh, you're beautiful. Fix your hair. Here's some money to go get it done. Here's you." He was just uplifting me. He was just saying that I was beautiful. He was just encouraging me to
Mhm.
where if my self-esteem was low, he was building it up. He was being a great man of God that was just good to the kids. It was accepting the kids and saying, providing for the kids. I just remember I was working a part-time job, and he was like, "No, I don't want you to work a part-time job." And he was like, "Whatever you make on that job, I will give you the money to provide for to provide for the family," even though it was a long distance. And I was like, God, he's, for somebody to even do this. We live in a long distance relationship. He's in DC and I'm in North Carolina. And he was just building my self esteem up. He was building me up to saying, "You are beautiful. You are a great woman. You are a great parent," and things like that. So he was really, and still is, calls me beautiful, calls me chocolate cupcake. I mean, you name it, just different type of things. So he encourages me. He does all of that stuff still to this day, and I just love it. Just love it.
Mhm. Mhm. So you've changed in what way? Like what? You feel better about yourself now? You believe in yourself more? Like how have you changed?
Right. So I'm not down. I'm not hiding things. So now I'm upbeat. I'm more of, I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to sit there and let it stay in, like the inside. So I'm able to talk about it to people. Hey, this is affecting me. This is bothering me. I'm able to, I have my group of people that my circle is small,
Mhm.
of who I can confide in and talk to, and then, vent to, and they can pray with me. But the thing about it is, I don't allow that to linger around. I don't allow Satan to say, have a field day with me. I will not allow that, because I'm going to address it, and then I'm going to move. I'm going to address it, and then I move on, and then I let God handle it, because I know that if I try to handle it, it's not going to go well. But if I allow God to fix that situation, or God to fix that, that whatever that is, He can handle it and He can resolve it better than I can. So therefore, I give it to Him, because the Bible talks about cast all your cares upon Him, for He cares. So I just give it to God, and then I'm able to tell other women of how God uprooted all of that stuff, how He revived me, refreshed me, reset me, rebuild. He just rebuilt me. And the thing about it is, I allowed God to do it, because it's one thing to where you say you allow it and then you don't see it happen, but you can see it
Mhm.
in me and my mom, and they can actually see that I'm different. I'm not the same as I was. I'm not hiding. I'm not, kind of like pretending that everything is okay when I know that it's not. And I'm open, like I'm saying, hey, this is bothering me. And even in my marriage now, if something may be bothering me, my husband and I, we communicate. We're talking it out. We're saying, hey, we have a system set up. Hey, this is bothering me. We have a way of how we're speaking to one another. We're speaking to one another. We're watching how our words are, to making sure that we build one another up. Even though I encourage other people, I make sure I encourage my husband. My husband, he's a comedian. He makes other people smile, but he also puts a smile on my face. I put a smile on his face. So that is totally different, far more from what the first marriage was.
Mhm. Okay, let me get to some more comments. Newton Mizik says, if God is for you, who can be against you?
Yeah.
Seems like you were built on a strong foundation for such a time to help other women
Yes.
to be released of similar situations.
Yes.
Continue to be strong, sister.
Amen.
Nyoka says deep, and Myrna says great testimony after the test that
Mm.
made you stronger.
Yes.
Definitely that. So you're living a life now with your ministry and being able to help other women. Tell us about some of the things that you're doing, and what do you have planned? What's happening?
Right. So the minute that I asked my husband at that particular time in 2011 to the forgiveness, and remember I mentioned that God's hands was on me, that ministry was birthed in 2011. And then I allowed God to show me how to form this ministry of talking to other women or talking to people about being released from that, because it's not just relationships. It could be something on your job. It could be cancer. It could be sickness. It could be God wants to release it up off of you. He doesn't want you to continue to keep suffering. Whatever your situation is, whether it's on your job or whoever, maybe situations in your family, he doesn't want you to continue to be bond, in chains and bondage and things like that. So this ministry was after what ended up happening, a birthday gift to myself. My birthday, September 11th, was in 2012.
Happy belated, yeah, just
Thank you.
yesterday.
Yes, just yesterday. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What ended up happening in 2012, I went on and got a tax ID. And I was just building myself. I was just proud. I was like, oh, I'm going to get a tax ID. And I'm name it, actually form the LLC, formed it, named it Release, and starting to get the ministry. And I started out with have still the t-shirts. And at that particular time, I'm a writer. I've always been a writer. Even in high school, I like to write encouragement. God was always, my mom would probably say I wrote on her things all the time when I was growing up, my name and just different type of things and quotes and stuff like that. So I'm a writer. So on Facebook, what I do, God has me, he gives me words. I call them words of encouragement and wisdom to encourage others, whether it's men, women, or children, pastors or leaders. Everybody needs encouragement. You don't have to know anybody to pray, to encourage them. You can just do it. So God just gives me words of encouragement to post on Facebook, post on social media, the different platforms, and even also minister on YouTube as well. So I use those platforms to get the word of God out, to win souls for Christ. And so that's how I'm able to tell other people the goodness of God, that if God did it for me, I know that God can do it for them. And so, and like I said, the ministry is released. It talks about, I will overcome, be strong, and keep on keeping on. So even in the midst of what you're going through, we can keep on keeping on. We're not going to allow our past to keep us held down. So the ministry of release is talking about uplifting, is to inspire, to educate, to empower others, that they can come up out of that. God can release them up out of whatever they may be going through. God can release it up out of them. And so that's what this ministry is about. So I do encouragement speaking at women's conferences. I do book clubs and things like that. And so one of the other things that I did was I wanted to become a self-published author. And so if I may, I have my book here called Been Released. I self-published this last year, along with 4 other books at the same time. So I self-published this a book called Been Released, whatever. And it pretty much talks about, I just want to read the back of it. Are you ready to be transformed, to be set free, and to be released? This book, Been Released, will encourage, it will inspire, uplift you, and then guide you to get through the hard challenges that you may be facing. So that's what this book is about. And it talks about your telling your testimony, overcome to tell your testimony, because we overcome to tell our testimony to other people. We don't just hold our testimony for ourselves, but it's to help somebody else out. And then after you're telling your testimony, you're overcoming. God says, then you've been released. You've been released. Whatever God has released you from, you have been released from it. You can go ahead and seek God first of what he wants you to do. You can do it with confidence. Whatever God is a purpose for us, he has an assignment, and we have to have the confidence to do it. And we have to, a lot of times, sometimes some people, one of the chapters that I have in here talks about believe, like, and enjoy yourself. Sometimes we don't believe in ourselves. Sometimes we don't even like ourselves. We try to be somebody that we're not, which we're looking at other people and say, hey, I want to be like them. I want to do what they're doing. But God says, no, I want you to be you. I want you to be the person that I have. So that's in this book too. It's talking about overcoming to be transformed, to be set free. And it's basically talking about living God's purpose for your life and becoming confident in who you are,
Mm-hmm.
not just who your mom is, your friend is, but becoming confident in who you are. So I self-published this book on last year, as well as some devotions. So this is Get Wisdom and Get Understanding, 31 days of devotionals from the book of Proverbs. So God had um, told me back in 2017, read a chapter a day in Proverbs and pick a verse out. And I picked the verse out, and he gave me the words of encouragement to write with that. And the other thing of it is, back in 2011, I said I did a journal. So here's a purpose journal that God had me to do, which is the scripture talk about Habakkuk 2:2. The Lord says, write the vision, make it plain, and run with it. A lot of times we have the vision, but we're not doing any work. We're not running with it. So here you can write your purpose journal of what God has purposed in your heart to do. A lot of times when I talk to people, I often tell people it's okay to help other people, but don't forget about yourself. So many people forget about their purpose. They forget about what God has told them, that they put their selves on the back burner. But I want to encourage people, don't forget about you. So I speak it and I encourage other people, don't forget about yourself. And in speaking of that, I created this along with that, with the book called Invest in My Purpose. And it says invest in my purpose because it's investing in yourself. And when I encourage different people, I say, nobody is going to invest in you like you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're investing so many other people, and that's fine. It's great to help other people, but don't forget about yourself. And so that's what the books are all about. And you know, you can get some of them on Amazon, and you can also get them on my website, www.beenreleased.com, on my website, as well as I have T-shirts and also I do have. If anyone is interested in self-publishing, I self-publish through Amazon. I have a course that I teach every first Monday of each month. You can sign up on Eventbrite. You can also go on my website. It's on there if you want to interested about self-publishing. And also I have where I have a Take a Leap of Faith teleconference every first Sunday of each month, where I have women that come on and I pray with women all over the world. Like I said, we don't have to know each other to pray, to stand in the gap, to intercede for one another. And so God gives me a word of encouragement every month. He gives me that word. It's the first Sunday of each month at 9 o'clock. And like I said, you can go on my website and it's a call-in number. You just call in. And if you have a prayer request, you can say your prayer request. We also take praise reports. We celebrate everybody. And that's how also God uses the platform to win souls for Christ, of leading others to Christ as well. And just encouraging women, encouraging men, encouraging children, because you never know who you may meet that God is saying, hey, speak a word to them. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a willing vessel that want to be used by God to help build the kingdom of God up.
That's loaded. She said a mouthful. So she's definitely on Facebook. You can reach out to her, Keisha Wade, or listen to the program again, and you can get all that information that she just gave. But her website is, was it beenreleased.com?
It's www.beenreleased.com.
Beenreleased.com. Let's get to some more comments. Tiffany Thompson says, "Thank you for sharing this. It's Thank you for sharing. This is giving me hope."
Amen. Praise
That's giving
God.
me hope. Mike Wells says, "God is good."
Yes.
And yeah, so everybody says, Verna says, "Wonderful words. Don't forget about yourself. Thanks for
Mhm.
sharing your story."
Amen.
I think people miss the power of journaling. I'm telling
Mm.
you,
Yes.
it is. I've been a writer all my life. I've been in the communications field.
Mhm.
And just the power of being able to write sometimes what you can't verbally express,
Right.
because everybody isn't verbal, and we
Mhm.
understand that. But to be able to release
Mm.
whatever it is that you're feeling,
Mhm.
if only in writing in a journal, is something that I believe is just priceless, because there are times when you simply don't know what to say,
Right.
or to express how you're feeling in that
Mhm.
moment,
Right.
but you can simply write it.
Mhm.
and keep a journal of those thoughts, because you get to see the transformation
Yes.
that has happened in your life, and you've experienced it beginning journaling from, was it 2011 to date? Like, you have 10 years
Yes.
to
Yes.
like look and see how you've grown, how
Mhm.
you've evolved
Yes.
as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, and that is just such a powerful thing. I
Amen.
want to, yeah, Dorothy Cooper says self-care is important.
It is.
Absolutely. You
Yes.
have to be able at some point. I think what happens too is having a vision with and for your own life,
Mhm.
in order to see that. That's why the power of forgiveness is so important.
It is.
That's why the yielding yourself to Holy Spirit and what he would say is so important, so that you can get a vision of for your life what it is that you're supposed to be doing, so that you can begin to walk in the purpose of God and begin to experience all these wonderful things that he has in store for your life. And
Amen.
that's why a lot of people are stuck,
Mhm.
because though painful it may be, and there are so many people that have so many traumatic stories and background, and we share some of them. But the beauty of being able to release that
Mhm.
is something that the world needs to hear over and over and over again. And it is a process. For some people, it's miraculous. Some
Right.
people are wired where they don't allow things, they don't take it in and allow things to fester and grow. Some people are wired that way.
Right.
Others are not. Some people are wired where they just hold it until
Yes.
a
Yes.
combustion happens, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
But that's what's so important, to be able to embrace that power of forgiveness, so that you can be released.
Right. Mhm.
And the release is just so that you can begin to walk in everything that God has ordained for your life.
Man.
You will never experience Him in the fullness
Right.
until
Exactly.
you're able to do that. So it's such a powerful ministry that you have, and what you're doing to help to encourage
Amen.
people to move on, to
Yes.
get past that which was once holding them hostage,
Right.
so that they are able to walk in the fullness, and to be overcomers, and to be strong, and to keep
Mhm.
on keeping on, as you say.
Right.
All
Yes.
of those things are so very important. Charlene Bethel Rule says, yes, writing is therapeutic. Absolutely.
Right. Right.
I recommend it. It is
Mhm.
therapeutic, and to be able to look back at where you were, because it could have been in a moment where you were really feeling down and out.
Right.
That
Right.
could have been yesterday. That could have been 10 years ago. And then today, you're
Mhm.
transformed,
Mhm.
because you've been on this journey that has really just helped you to blossom and to overcome. And there are so many people out there with stories, if not similar to yours, but with stories where there are people right now grappling
Mm.
with this the spirit of unforgiveness,
Right.
because they are holding on to what has happened to them,
Mhm.
how that person has hurt them, and they're still feeling that pain, and waking up with that pain every day. I want you to speak to somebody who may still be wrestling with that spirit of unforgiveness.
Right. Um, I want to just encourage you all that even in the midst of what I went through and whatever you may be going through, I thank God that He never left me. Even in the midst of when He was speaking to me and saying, don't do this, don't do that. I thank God, even in the first marriage, that He never left me. He was always with me. And coming into the forgiveness and just getting into that agreement with God of saying, God, I surrender. Because there was a point of time to where I'm trying to take on that load. And I said, I have to surrender all of this. And one of the things that God was saying as I was surrendering, now you need to ask. And God, I was allowing God to speak to me. That means that I had to open up my ears to where I could had to hear the voice of God speak to me. That means anything that the enemy was speaking, other people was speaking that was not doing me any good. I had to allow myself to say, God, open my ears to hear your voice, and a stranger's voice, Satan's voice, I will not follow. And so I had to allow God to come into my life. It was almost like I had to rededicate my life back to God and say, okay, let me be obedient to God so I can truly be set free. And one of the things that God, first thing he told me was ask him to forgive you. Ask him. And I said, I wrestled with that. And God was like, no, when you do that, watch what I do. And sure enough, I was released. It was like it was, if you've ever felt like something coming up off you, it was like he was pulling all the chains. He was pulling all the things, all the hurt. And I was allowing God to, one of the things for the ministry is I symbolize like the butterfly. We have to go through some stages. And so I was going through the stages just like that caterpillar becomes a butterfly. God had to mold me. He had to shape me. He had to reshape me, reform me, and remold me to get me back to where he wanted me to be. And then I had to embrace the change. So embracing it and saying, you know what? I'm surrendering it. I can't do it my way. I got to do it God's way, because it's just like I had to go around that mountain so many times. And going around it, you have to think, what did it get you? It didn't get me nowhere. But I thank God that he was still there. God was still there for me. And in the midst of me going through that, I had to continue to keep trusting God. Why? Because as I began to keep trusting God, I saw new results. New things begin to take place. And so when I began to open up the Bible, when I began to read the word, when I began to worship God, God would wake me up 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm praying. I'm going back and forth, praying in my house and everything, and rededicating my house to God. I was laying my hands on the stove. I was laying my hands on different type of things. I was just reestablishing, even though I've been in church all my life, just reestablishing that recommitment to God of saying, God, revive me, refresh me, restore me, renew my heart, renew my mind. When things are renewed, everything is not the same anymore. And I just embraced that change. And, like I said, the number one thing I had to do was just ask for forgiveness. When you ask for forgiveness, it's just like a breath of fresh air that comes in, and you're able to move. That means that person, no matter what they may say, cannot move me. It didn't shake me. It didn't break me like they thought it would. But I allow God to say, you know what? Come here, my child. And God just took me in, even in the midst of my disobedience. Like I said, I knew that I probably shouldn't have married him, but God was still there. But I repented to God. And God says, come on in, my child. He still accepted me. And then, like I said, what the enemy meant for bad, even in the midst of that marriage turned into my ministry of what took place. It turned it into my ministry.
Absolutely. You learned obedience.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. Learned obedience.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of more comments before we go. Good night, Bishop Chester Roll. He says, you were embracing the change. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, God is faithful even when we are faithless.
Yeah.
Tiffany Thompson says, forgiveness is not for them. It is for ourselves. It's for us, and there's a feeling of peace. Naoka says there's a feeling of peace
Yes.
when we forgive. Well, that
Mm-hmm.
wraps it up. We're at the end. We usually do 90 minutes, and we're at the end of
Right.
this show tonight. What a pleasure it's been
It was a
having you to share your story.
thank
I
you.
know that people have been encouraged and blessed, even as you've heard some of the comments that have been read tonight. And I pray that your ministry just expands, it becomes global, and
Thank you.
that you reach and connect with those people who need to hear a message of hope and encouragement, and who need to hear your testimony as an example of what can happen to someone who decides to walk in obedience, because
Amen.
ultimately that's what it was.
Yes. To God
You
be the
walked
glory.
in obedience, you forgave, and you've been released.
Amen. That's
And
right.
you've been released.
Amen.
And Dorothy Cooper says, happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, on that note, I want to thank you all guys for swerving with me once again. This is a show where we have these adult conversations, and we talk to people who have overcome challenges and are not afraid to show their scars or speak their truth. Thank you so much, Keisha. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful week
You
and
too.
God bless you all. Remember, guys, I'll be off for the next 2 weeks, taking a break. But I'll be back in October with a brand new season of some more people. And remember, all of you, if you know somebody who wants to share their story, hit me up, let me know. I will be happy to have a talk with them because this is a platform for people to share their stories. So,
Amen.
good night, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you all for tuning in once again. Bye bye.
Okay.